Barnie the Barnacle, a short story written and illustrated by Amanda Van Pelt. To my family, for all the good times we've had at the beach. It was a crisp spring morning on the Atlantic coast. The steady foghorn moaned in the distance, and the quiet ducks began to mumble. The beach was waking up too. Seagulls were chattering away, wishing others good morning as the sun stretched its rays and smiled down on the creatures below. In the tide pools, the morning tide was beginning to rise, as the ocean water began to seep in through the cracks in the rocks, and Barney the Barnacle was preparing for his big day ahead. His granddaughter, after weeks of traveling through the open ocean in her teenage years, was returning home to take her place among the rest of the family. There was much to be done before the high tide covered their rocky home. Most of all, a spot must be found on the rock, through the cluster of cousins, siblings, and family members many times removed, for his granddaughter. Barney reached himself out of his shell and peered about. Though his eyesight was not too good, he could see through his singular eye an empty space right beside him. What a joy, he thought. His granddaughter would be closer than he had ever imagined. Just then, a surge of water knocked him back into his shell. The high tide was coming in. The normal murmur of the tide pool became a busy hustle as the pool became a part of the open ocean. Barney could hear the thundering roar of a conversing pair of whales, the chirp of a playful romp of otters, the quiet blub-gub of nearby fish. He reached himself out of his shell once more and began eating his breakfast, fresh from the open waters. Yum, he thought. This batch tasted like it was from the Pacific. Suddenly there was a tap on the side of his shell. He peered over, and there was his granddaughter, Burnett, already firmly fastened to the side of their rock. My, how time flies! Grandpa Barney, she said, how are you? Oh, very fine, thanks. How are you? How was your journey, Burnett? Burnett grew quiet for a second before replying, It was actually quite horrible. I wish I had never left. Barney was surprised by this response. Oh dear, what happened? He questioned. Burnett shuddered in her shell. Well, I'm sure it would have been an amazing adventure, but I got caught in a pile of floating plastic and barely broke free in time to make it safely back to our rock. Grandpa Barney, how did our beautiful waters get to be so polluted? Ah, Barney knew the tale, but it was a long one. Settle down for a bit, Burnett, and I will tell you a story. Did you know that our species of barnacle is not really from these parts of the globe? We have done quite well here, thriving off the food supply and climate, even pushing other species out, but we actually originate in the Pacific waters. We are what some call an invasive species. I grew up on the coast of a small island near Australia. It was a very busy coast, with lots of different marine creatures living there. Life was exciting. Every day seemed like a carnival. Every creature had separate lives, right on top of each other. The seals would tell jokes and sunbathe before swimming into deeper waters. The seabirds held formalized school and even singing lessons. The crabs would travel around to other beaches during the day and report the daily gossip to anyone who was listening at night. And we would cluster on the rocks, splashing our parents and annoying the plankton as they came in on the high tide. When it was time for me to leave the rocks, my parents knew it was going to be the last time they saw me. I was an adventurous barnacle, always swimming to the edge of the tide pool, always questioning the plankton about their journeys through the open waters. I wanted to explore the whole world. My mother and father made me promise that I would return to the rocks of my birth, but they knew I was as wild as the ocean itself. Moving along swiftly with the receding tide, I met up with a rowdy bunch of plankton. They were passing around adventures. One had escaped the mouth of a whale, one reported on the growth of a new coral reef, one had experimented with a new type of food, one you can eat but not digest. which I found out later to be degraded plastic. "Try it, dude," told me. I traveled with them for a couple of weeks, seeing things I had never seen before. Whales with their huge bristly teeth, animals that could camouflage themselves to rocks and the ocean floor, and anemones of all shades and sizes, and much more. But I also saw mysterious large floating debris and dark rainbowy streaks on the ocean's surface. At the time I found them to be quite interesting. There was just so much to see. After dodging numerous boats destined for foreign places, I finally decided to submit myself to a large ship in the Hong Kong harbor. What better way to explore the world? No sooner had I done so than the ship took off, speeding along to the power of its motor. I looked around to the side of me and could make out lots of other barnacles of all different species. One caught my eye and introduced himself as Bloody Barry. He was a wise old barnacle, one of the species that lived the longest, with a fierce eye for change. When I told him about all the new things I had seen thus far on my journey, he got downright nasty. "The floating debris you saw was plastic, and the rainbow was an oil slick. Humans have been polluting our waters for years now, and they don't seem to care a bit about it." "Humans?" I asked. Humans had come down to our beach, but very infrequently, and they were never destructive towards the wildlife there. "Yes, humans. They only care about themselves. They are always searching for cheaper ways to do things, like power this hunk of metal we're riding on. Do you know what makes this thing go? Oil. The rainbows you saw. And do you know what oil does to ocean life? Well, I'll let Marty tell you. We should be pulling up to the New York harbor very shortly." When we pulled up to the harbor, it was the afternoon low tide. Bloody Barry and I rose out of the water into the blinking sun. Shapes moved about on the crowded docks. Bloody Barry grunted, "Humans," eating, strolling, and conversing with each other. Some were trading goods, hoisting objects onto ships, or dragging them off. Some filed into a nearby cruise ship, shouting and laughing to each other. A large, growling machine pulled onto the docks alongside others. "A truck," Bloody Barry said, and unloaded a small tank with a frightened-looking dolphin smashed inside. She was dressed up in a small pink tutu. "That's Dolly," Bloody Barry scowled as she was wheeled onto the ship after the line of humans. "They send her in there for entertainment. She's completely deaf from all the noise. Hasn't been to the open ocean since she was 2. Seabirds cluttered the sky, swooping down occasionally to dig through a trash can for food. One swooped down and landed on a guardrail of the ship. "Hey, Barry," he murmured. "Who's the new guy?" Bloody Barry turned to me. "This here is Marty. He explained. Marty, meet Barney. He attached himself at Hong Kong." Marty gave me a soft smile. "How was your trip?" I found out shortly that while both were very angry at the condition of our ocean, Bloody Barry was the pessimist, while Marty was an optimist. Marty's parents had died when he was very young after eating large amounts of plastic. They were part of the first generation after plastic, Marty said, when seabirds didn't know to avoid trash. Marty himself had been caught in an oil slick. His feathers were still stained gray, but a bird rescue team had taken him to a rescue center and cleaned him up before releasing him. He would have died if they hadn't helped him. "That," Marty explained, "is why I'm an optimist. Humans, just like marine creatures, are a diverse bunch. Some of them are already recycling, doing beach cleanups, and working to protect our habitat." Bloody Barry grunted and Marty smiled. "Change takes time," he said. "But it starts with simple actions from a small minority. Movements grow just like nature does. They begin with a small seed," he added. We left Marty in New York soon after, but I never forgot what he said. I I eventually was told by Bloody Barry that I had cemented myself aboard a crude oil carrier. We started our loop in the Middle East and made our way along Africa and Asia, and then circled back around, stopping first at the United States before returning to the Middle East to reload. With such a broad span of shipments, we touched almost every ocean, and I was truly able to see the whole world. There were old shipwrecks spouting plumes of coral, flotillas of swordfish, mysterious islands with bright palm trees, spider crabs that scaled the ocean floor, clouds of oil, displaced marine life, huge swirling piles of trash and plastic, and of course lots and lots of tiny plastic particles my plankton friends had told me to try, nearly invisible to the eye. The boat itself would occasionally drip oil into the ocean if the crew had not properly attended the cargo, and in big storms. There was great beauty and great pollution, a ravaging war of nature against mankind's waste. I wondered, seeing before my eye the effects of humans on marine life, if Marty was being too optimistic. The conditions of the ocean seemed just to be worsening. But then something happened that changed my life forever. The ship ran into a massive storm off the coast of the United States, causing the ship to nearly crash into the shore. It just managed to skim past, but I was knocked off the side of the boat and thrown, with the waves, to shore. I somehow managed to become stuck in the rocky sand, but I knew if I were to be taken back to the ocean with the high tide, the strong currents would not let me survive. But then, as if by a miracle, a child only about 3 or 4 years old, visiting the beach with her parents, picked me up. I thought at first she was going to eat me, but then she slowly stepped towards a rocky tide pool. She set me down firmly between the crevices of the rock and then ran back to her parents. I looked around me and saw many other barnacles of many different species. I knew I was home. And Marty was right after all. A human had saved me. I was hit with an emotion I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I could see that humans have a heart. And ever since I've been living on this rock. Burnett gasped. A rock! Yes, I even started a family. Barney smiled and looked towards the horizon. The sun was almost out of sight. We should get some sleep, Burnett. You have a big day tomorrow. First day as an official adult. Burnett yawned. One question, please, Grandpa Barney, she pleaded. All right, one question. Do you think if humans knew how we feel, they would stop polluting? Barney hadn't thought of that before. Maybe, he replied. He turned to Burnett to ask, wherever did you think of that? But she was already fast asleep. Barney looked up at the town above, now just a collection of lights. Maybe, he thought. Sources used to create this book. Thank you for reading my book. I hope you are inspired to help the ocean and the marine life it supports. Remember, a lot of small actions can make a big difference in the end.